Oh, glorious Nrsimha devotees. Oh, glorious Nrsimha devotees. Oh, glorious Nrsimha devotees. Oh, glorious lotus feet of Sri Guru and Sri Garanga. Oh, glorious Sri Prabhupada Ki Jai. Oh, Vishnu Padaya. Krishna Stamarish. Oh, Vishnu Padaya. Krishna Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Na Vayang Prabhavas Tang Tvang Navayam Pravastang Tvam Navayam Prabhavastang Tvam Anukartum Griheshwari Anukartum Griheshwari Anukartam Griheshwari Navayang Prabhavastang Tvam Anukartum Griheshwari Api Ayusha Va Kachnyena Apyayusha Va Kachnyena Apyayusha Va Kachnyena Ye Chanye Guna Gridnava Nachanye Guna Gridnava Ye Chanye Guna Gridnava Apyayusha Nakasnyena Ye Chanye Guna Gridnava Navayang Prabhavastang Tvam Anukartam Griheshwari Apyayusha Nakasnyena Ye Chanye Guna Gridnava Navayang Prabhavastang Tvam Anukartam Griheshwari Apyayusha Nakasnyena Ye Chanye Guna Gridnava Vaishnavis. Na, never. Vayam, we. Prabhava, are able. Tam, that. Tvam, unto you. Anukartum, do the same. Griha Ishvari, O Queen of the Home. Api, in spite of. Ayusha, by duration of life. Va, or in the next life. Katsnyena, entire. Ye, who. Cha, also. Anye, others. Guna Gridnava, those who are able to appreciate qualities. Translation. O Queen of the Home, we are not able to act like you, nor could we repay you for what you have done, even if we worked for our entire life or even after death. To repay you is not possible, even for those who are admirers of personal qualities. Responsively, please. O Queen of the Home, we are not able to act like you, nor could we repay you for what you have done, even if we worked for our entire life, or even after death. To repay you is not possible, even for those who are admirers of personal qualities. It's kind of an interesting statement by Kashyapa Muni. And we see here that Diti is making a proposition that he's not really in favor of. And he's trying by sweet words to convince her, this is not a good thing, let's not do it. And it's quite interesting the way he's presenting it, because it's a bit of a joking spirit here. I'll read the purport in a second, but there's a bit of a joking spirit here, because he's referring to her in the singular. This is the way Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains it anyhow. He's referring to her in the singular, because he says Griha Ishvari, meaning a single person. But then he says Vayam, meaning we. He's talking about men in general. So he's got a bit of a joking spirit. It's kind of interesting. So he's trying to keep it light, but she's getting very serious. So he's trying to keep it light and just with a bit of a joke kind of, you know. And it's as I was mentioning the other day, when we look at this, we can see how the psychology of individuals is being explained, and also, but not just the individuals, but the psychology or the nature of the self, because what we find happening is when the senses are pushing, and they keep pushing and they keep pushing and they keep pushing, and they don't stop till they're gratified. And then what happens? Lamentation. We feel, oh gosh, I shouldn't have done that, you know. And this is exactly what happens here. So this is really, as with all chapters of the Bhagavatam, it's a very instructive chapter, and there's a lot we can learn from this if we are able to see, you know, what is being explained here. So, purport. So much glorification of a woman by a husband indicates that he is henpecked or is talking lightly in a joke. Kashyapa meant that householders living with wives enjoy the heavenly blessings of sense enjoyment, and that at the same time have no fear of going down to hell. This is, of course, as if they follow regulative principles. If they don't follow regulative principles, then their destination is hell. The man in the renounced order of life has no wife and may be driven by sex desire to seek another woman or another's wife, and thus go to hell. In other words, the so-called man of the renounced order, who has left his house and wife, goes to hell if he again desires sexual pleasure. There's a specific word that is used in the scriptures for a renunciate who desires to enjoy again with a woman. Does anyone know what that word is? quite a heavy word. Yeah, Vantasi. And Vantasi has a very specific meaning. You know what the word means? Yeah. It's pretty gross, isn't it? So it's like when one takes to the renounced order, it's like sometimes you'll see dogs because dogs have this nature, especially you see like dogs like boxers and things like that, because they're very close to the wild dog. A wild dog will go and find something to eat, and then it'll voraciously eat it very quickly. It's not digesting it, and then it'll go away somewhere else and vomit it up. And then slowly eat it down, somewhere it's safe, and then slowly they'll eat that again and digest it. But from our perspective, that sounds like such a disgusting thing to do. So the point is there, the Shastra is making the point that if someone takes the renounced order of life is often described as social suicide. It means you're committing suicide on all these social enjoyments. You're giving it up completely. You're renouncing it. But not just renouncing it, you're just like seeing it as being, insignificant, unpleasant, unpalatable. And you don't want to go there. So to take that path and then to, again, go back to, trying to enjoy the relationships with the opposite sex is considered to be a very fallen condition. Therefore, the Shastra uses such strong terms to really impress upon us the point of don't do this. But Krishna consciousness is so interesting that even if you do this, even if you have to go back, even if you can't control your senses, still, try to maintain your Krishna consciousness. Because we understand this material world, it's a difficult place. And Mahaprabhu, he would say, it's not a fit place for a gentleman. He compared it to being like a place into which, a ditch. I don't know if you've ever been down to the Jamuna when it's summertime and the river's low. They dig all these trenches. The council goes down there and digs all these trenches. And the poor people go there, and the sadhus and they go there, and that's where they pass stool. So Mahaprabhu has compared the material world to be a place like a ditch in which people pass stool. And it's like, not a very palatable sort of environment, and it's really stinky, and the dogs go down there, the pigs go down there, they love it. It's like dinner time. Yet for us, it's considered very, very unpalatable. And so, sometimes, you probably had the experience when you're on Prikram, especially in Mayapur, and you'll be just going around Prikram and going to these different places, and you're listening to the speaker saying, and you're sort of moving around, and all of a sudden you stand on something that's a bit squishy, and it's like someone's passed stool there, and it's like, So that's, Mahaprabhu's compared the material world to being like that. But the interesting thing is that the majority of people are relishing that, they're diving into it, they're swimming in it, and thinking it's just nectar, this ditch in which people pass stool. Because this is, the material world is not a pleasant place. Because ultimately, what we experience in this material world is birth, death, old age, and disease. And of course, we see that materialistic people will dress these things up to seem very, very attractive. Like they'll talk about birth, how birth is such a wonderful thing. And how it's so glorious, it's very beautiful. I was there when my daughter was born. I would never call it a wonderful thing. It was, from my experience, it was suffering from start to finish. Not so much for me. I didn't really suffer very much, but the child was suffering and the mother was suffering. It's a very difficult situation. And of course, anyone who's has a recollection of childbirth knows that it's a suffering condition. I was talking up in New Gokul, there was, because they're reading from the 31st chapter of this canto, which is called The Movements of the Living Entity. It describes how the living entity, when it's in the womb, fortunate living entity is meditating on Krishna, and thinking of Krishna, and saying, my Lord, when I come out of here, let me remember you. And then as he's advancing, the living entity is advancing in his understanding while in the womb, he's thinking, no, I don't want to come out of here because actually it's very difficult out there and I'll forget you. And then what happens is when the child is born, I can't remember the names of the skull. The child's skull is kind of soft and pliable, and it's got 3 plates. That's from here that goes back, and there's another one in the middle. And they describe how there's like sutures or stitches between these different plates on the skull, so the skull can, and they're very soft, so the skull can move. And what happens is as the child is born and it comes out the uterus, because the head's kind of quite a bit bigger than uterus, a lot bigger actually, and it gets compressed as it comes out a lot. So, I mean, even the doctors say substantially compressed. So you can imagine that's not a comfortable situation. To have your head compressed like that. Of course, it doesn't hurt. To hell, it doesn't hurt. These kids are screaming when they come out. Why? Because they're in pain. You can imagine if someone sort of stuck your head in a vice and sort of cranked it up. It reminds me of a TV show I used to see when I was a child. But you can imagine doing that; it'd be quite painful. So it's a very painful situation for the child when it's born. So, excuse me. So we can see that the material world is, birth is a painful situation. Growing up, you see, like when the child's born, it comes out, it's experiencing so, and the Bhagavatam describes this so wonderfully. When the child is born, it's forced to lie because it has no choice. It can't do anything. The child doesn't say, "Oh, I don't want to lie here. Can you change the bedding? Can you take me to the toilet? I'm hungry. I want to eat this. I want to eat that. Don't feed me that. It upsets my tummy." Child can't say any of it. It's just forced. Whatever's put in front of it, it has to deal with. And the Bhagavatam describes how the child lies in this foul bed with its own sweat and urine and things like that. So the bedding is just like really, ugh. And we see children. Sometimes children is like these days. People are thinking it's quite sophisticated. We've got this thing really well sorted out. So what we do is we put nappies on the child. Why? So then we don't have to clean up after them all the time. But then the poor little child is walking around with a toilet on itself. It's got the stool and urine strapped to its body. I mean, how disgusting is that? But we think this is really sophisticated because we kind of contain it all, and it's like, But actually, from the point of Brahminical culture, this is considered to be a very, very, unpalatable situation. So, and then of course, we make it all sound very romantic and all very, flowery words and things like that, and then so the whole life you're growing up, so much frustration for the child when they can't communicate. When they start to communicate, they want this, but they can't have it. Their parents won't let them have it, or they have interactions with other children, and many of you probably remember what it's like at school. I remember it's like some of these kids at school are just so unkind to each other. They just taunt each other, they torment each other, they call them names, they might have a big nose, so or whatever, they call them so many different names. They're very harsh. And these things make such a strong impression upon the child. And we see that some children, when they go, and now they have this thing with bullying, which is, it's always been there, at least in my experience. I was at school like 50 years ago, and it's like, I remember then, quite well, the bullying that used to go on, the bullying that I experienced, and the bullying that I probably did to others, but now it's, at least, people are becoming more aware of it and they're trying to stop it. But the thing is, like, bullying has such a long-term psychological effect on people, and especially now because people are becoming more and more precious. I was speaking, you all know Toshan Krishna, I think. I was speaking to him a few days ago, and because of the rain, the university cancelled classes for the day. You can believe that? It's raining. They cancelled classes. People are becoming pretty precious, just because, it's just like the rain's just going to happen. There's not much you can do about it, and so, and it's quite extraordinary with the amount of rain that's coming out of the sky these days, and it's just, be sure that it's going to increase. It's just going to get more and more. Just like these recent floods, because I live in northern New South Wales, I've kind of been following the floods a lot. In 2017 we had the last big flood, and they said this is a 1 in 100 year flood. Guess what, 5 years later, we have, as the Premier calls it, a 1 in 1,000 year flood. But the thing that I find quite interesting is, how would he know it was 1 in 1,000 years? Was he here to see that? Were records taken at that point in time? So they just like throw out these things because they're really, really passionate, emotional people, and they throw out these really emotional things to try and galvanize support. But the fact of it is the flood was, 1974 was 54 or something, was a really big flood. The one in 2017 was bigger than that. The one in 2022 is bigger than that, and the one in 2027 is going to be bigger than that. And again and again and again, it's just going to get worse and worse and worse. The floods in Lismore, the last flood they had, the big flood they had was 2017, and the river there rose to 22 meters above its normal height, and the river this year rose to 24 meters. Can you believe that? 2 meters higher. How much water is coming out of the sky? And it's like, I often reflect on that when you see the rain, because, it rained pretty heavy this morning, but when it rains up home, it's like you can't see 2 feet in front of you sometimes. It rains so hard. I can be sitting on the veranda and I can't see the front yard. It's just not, it's just this water. Reflect on it. It's like, you've got a garden and you want to water the garden, you've got your little hose. How long is it going to take you to water that garden? Or say, for instance, you've got a few thousand acres of trees and you've got your little garden hose. How are you going to water that? It's just... But Krishna in a second just dumps all this water from the sky. He doesn't even need to have a hose or a reservoir or a tap or anything like that, pipes in the ground. It's just all up in the sky. And whenever he needs, he just dumps it and waters everything. So Krishna's arrangement is so perfect. Krishna's arrangement is so powerful, beyond what we can conceive. And like people hear about the pralaya, we understand that there's different devastations. There's partial devastations, and there's the pralaya, which is the full devastation. So at the point of the devastation, either partial or full, is water. It starts to rain, and it rains, and it rains, and it rains. And that might sound phantasmagorical to many people, but look what's happening right now. It's raining, 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 and the water's coming up. And so what happens when the devastation comes is it's more rain, and more rain, and more rain. It just keeps coming, and it's described how it comes down like columns. And like if you spend time in a place where it rains a lot, you'll see the water comes down like columns. It's just incredible how much rain comes out of the sky. And so we can understand that it's just more water goes for a longer period of time. This is what the devastation is like. And they were describing how, like, what happened in 2017 is we had this dump where there was 1.5 meters in 24 hours. It was just like incredible. But what's happened this time, they're saying that every hour for three or 4 days there was 50 mil of rain. So it was just kept coming and coming and coming. So, either way, the capacity for the amount of water that comes out of the sky is practically unlimited because it's Krishna's energy. And Krishna can do things like this. So, in this material world, we can't really conceive of how Krishna's energies are working, but we just have to accept that these are, Krishna's energies. As he describes in the Gita, he said, you should understand that all these glorious and wonderful creations spring from but a spark of my splendor. So you think of you look at this material universe and how diverse it is, and how vast and from our perspective at least, seemingly unlimited it is. It's not unlimited. It is finite. 4 billion miles, this universe. But how can you conceive 4 billion miles? It's like the frog in the well trying to conceive of the size of the Pacific Ocean based on his experience in the well. And the material scientists is like that. They try to perceive everything based on their own experience, but our experience is so limited in comparison to creation, just the material creation. Our experience is so limited. Not what to speak of the spiritual creation, which is unlimited. So, trying to conceive of this material creation, trying to understand the material creation without that perspective of Krishna is practically impossible. But if we understand Krishna, if we understand Krishna's nature, then it's easy for us to conceive how these things can happen. And he describes how this glorious and wonderful creation, which has many, many beautiful things and many, many horrible things, and it's so vast, it's just a spark. It's just a tiny, just like, okay, we go back, I can't remember, was it 2019 we had the bushfires? I remember flying into Sydney. I was coming back from India. It's kind of interesting. It's just like bushfires, pandemics, floods, wars. It's like, don't be surprised in the material world if there's some calamity. Prabhupada says, why are you surprised? It is the place of calamity. Just from one calamity to the next. That's what's going to happen in this material world. Just be, and that's like I was saying, Mahaprabhu says, a gentleman just finishes up his business and gets out of here as quick as possible because it's not a fit place for a gentleman or a gentle lady. We should understand what this world is. But the point I was making is, if we look at the vastness of this creation, and like comparing it to the bushfires, I remember flying in to Sydney, and you can actually see the bushfires from the sky. Normally you can't see, you can see the smoke, the plume of smoke, but I was really struck whether I could actually see the fire from 30,000 feet up. Very plain and clear, And, but if you see that massive fire, right, how vast it was, how much area it covered, take one spark of that, the comparison between that one spark and the whole fire, that's this material creation in comparison to the creation of Krishna, in comparison to the potency of Krishna. And the thing is with Krishna's potency, it's ever expanding. It's unlimited. So, and this creation is so insignificant in comparison, and here we are caught up in this creation thinking how wonderful it is. And we're enamored by it. But it's nothing. It's just a spark in comparison to Krishna's entire creation. So it's very easy, people become bewildered. And it's very easy for people to become bewildered by this creation. But if we simply keep our focus on Krishna, I was listening to this nice class this morning, and Prabhupada was talking about this point of how the living entity can easily become bewildered if the focus strays from Krishna. And he gave the example of Thakur Haridas. So Thakur Haridas was, there's many times not many times, several times, the situation was manifest where it was trying to sway him from his Krishna consciousness. And we know that the story of how, I can't remember the person's name, arranged for a prostitute to visit Thakur Haridas and try to sway him from his determination. And when she approached Thakur Haridas, she was speaking to him in very, very sweet words and provocative gestures and things like that. And she basically straightforward said, I just want to enjoy with you, I want to have sex with you. He said, certainly I will fulfill your desire. In a very sweet way. He didn't say, oh, get out of here, don't waste my time, anything like that. He said, certainly I'll fulfill your desire. If you just sit down here and wait, I just need to finish my vow to chant rounds, and then I'll fulfill your desire. So she sits down, he continues chanting. Now Thakur Haridas had a plan. He wasn't just like, no, I'm not going to do this. He was thinking, I'm going to convert her to Vaishnavism. So he sat down and he chanted his rounds there with her. And then it came to the end of the day, and he said, well, sorry, I still haven't finished my vow of chanting, so you'll have to come back tomorrow. So she's thinking, oh, I've actually, I'm influencing him, I'm wooing him over. He's going to succumb. And like when she went away, then the person who had sent her, I can't remember his name. It's mentioned in the CC. He said, "So how's it going?" He said, "Yeah, I've got him under the thumb. Today surely it will happen. So she goes back, same thing. Sit down. I'll satisfy your desires. Don't worry. Sit down. Same thing. So he's just chanting his japa, and so this goes on for several days, and then finally she reveals to Thakur Haridas because she become, by hearing the holy name, especially the pure holy name being chanted by such a great Vaishnava, her heart becomes purified. And then because her heart's become purified, she reveals the plan to Thakur Haridas. She says, okay, I knew that. Thakur Haridas knew why she was there. But he wanted to give her the opportunity of coming to Krishna consciousness. But the main point here that Prabhupada was stressing was that even though there was this extraordinarily beautiful woman was there, trying to entice Thakur Haridas to enjoy with her, he didn't become affected by that at any point. He didn't sway from his Krishna consciousness. And this is the only way that we can protect ourselves from the influence of the material nature. Krishna explains, he says, Devishi Gunamaya Maya Duratya Mame Vijay Prapadyante Mayamentam Taratite. This divine energy of mind, consisting of three modes of material nature, is very difficult to overcome. And why is it difficult to overcome? Because it's Devi, it's Krishna's energy, it's divine. It has the same nature as Krishna. So it very easily bewilders us. But he says, Mame Vijay Prapadyante Mayam Metam Taranti. But those who surrender Prapadyante, those who surrender to me, I reward them. They come to me very quickly. So the point is that Prabhupada was making in this class is if we just stay fixed in our determination to serve Krishna, we just stay fixed in our meditation upon Krishna, then material nature can't touch us. That's the simple thing. It's such a simple thing to do. Material nature is very, very powerful, and practically speaking, you cannot overcome, because we are insignificant in comparison. But if we connect with that person who is the most powerful, who no one can overcome, not even the material nature, and we are sheltered by that person, protected by that person, then very easily we can overcome. I can tell you an experience I had when I was young at school. I went to a fairly rough school. It was in a housing commission area in Victoria, near Geelong. And there was regularly fights. Every day there was fights. I just wasn't into stuff like that at all. It just wasn't my nature. And even like there was times they had knife fights and things like that. It was a bit of a wild school. But there was one guy, and he was like the school tough. He was the toughest guy in the school. He happened to be my brother's best friend. My brother wasn't a fighter either. And for some reason, he liked me, probably because of the connection with my brother. Therefore, I never had any problems with fights, because I had the protection of the toughest guy in the school. So no one picked on me, because they figured if they picked on me, they were going to wind up in a fight with this guy. Yeah. So we can see the same thing as there is with Krishna. If you're protected by Krishna, Maya Devi doesn't go near you. But the way to become protected by Krishna is to surrender to Krishna, to give your life, your very essence to Krishna. Not just like 9 to 5 kind of devotee thing, and then at home you go home, you're watching TV, you're doing this, you do whatever it is you do, That's not surrender. That's partial surrender. That's mixed devotion. And we see with the Devatas that they're generally what's called Kama Mishra Bhaktas, and they have so much experience where they're getting caught up in these very difficult situations. Indra becomes a pig, Brahma, he gets himself in trouble. I mean, all the different Devatas get them so much trouble. Stealing their guru's wife and all this kind of stuff, because they're not 100% surrendered to Krishna. And that's the point of bhakti, or the process of bhakti, is to give our lives completely for Krishna. But the thing is, like in the process of devotional service, it's made very easy for us. Like Mahaprabhu, he presented this process of Krishna consciousness in such an easy way, is you just give this one life to chanting the holy names of Krishna. That's all you need to do, is just hear and chant. You hear and chant. You don't have to do tremendous tapasya. You look at Valmiki and all these different personalities, they perform meditation for thousands and thousands of years. You don't have to do that. You don't have to perform extraordinary fire yagas or beautiful deity worship with gold and jewels and all this sort of stuff. You simply have to give this one life to chanting Hare Krishna and serving Krishna. And then you'll become freed from all this difficulty in this material world. And we see here that Kashyapa, he's seeing that, if I give in to my wife's advances, there's so much trouble's going to come from this. And so he's trying, in a sweet way, in a joking way, he's trying to convince her, no, don't do this. This is not a good thing. But she's been, smitten by the arrows of Cupid, and she just can't let go of this. And we'll see towards the end of the chapter, after they unite, how she's feeling repentant. Because this is the way that the senses act, especially the senses that are uncontrolled. We were talking about this, I think it was on Saturday morning. Was it Saturday? I can't remember. No, it would have been Friday morning. How the unregulated senses are just like a serpent, and they bite. And if you get bitten by the serpent, if the serpent's not controlled, then so much poison. And we know, in Australia's called the lucky country. And I met a guy a few years ago from the Darling Downs Zoo up in Toowoomba. He was at a program in Brisbane. And he said to me, "You know why Australia's called the lucky country? Any idea?" You probably don't, because this is his interpretation of it. Because of the 25 most venomous snakes in the world, Australia has 22. Yeah? That's why we're lucky. Yeah? And we've got the number 1, we've got the number 2, we've got the number 5. Yeah? So the number 1 is the inland taipan. The number 2 is the brown, the king brown, which we have in New Govardhan. We've got lots of them. The number 5 is the death adder. I almost stood on one of those a few years ago. Death adders are ferocious little creatures. They move really slowly, but when they bite, you cannot see them. They move so fast. They move so fast. And actually, I remember one year a jitta was poking one with a broomstick and he videoed it to see it. And then he slowed the video down, and it looked like it bit once, but when you slowed it down, you could see it bit several times. It was so fast. Yeah? And we remember catching one, the one that I almost stood on. And these devotees, they were holding it down with a broom, and the thing was just hissing, it was like flattening itself out and fattening itself up and flattening, just really hissing and making such a heavy noise. And these things, they get, because it talks about when you like a snake, when you stand on it, it bites. They get angry. They've got a really short temper, and they get really angry when people agitate them. And an envious man is compared to being like a snake, because they become very angry. So, and it's like that. I can't remember the point I was making with the snakes. Oh, that's right. Yeah, it's like the senses are like snakes, that if they're not controlled, then they can create havoc and they can kill you. I mean, if you get bitten by a decent bite, I mean, it's not that every snake bite's fatal, but if you get bitten decent and the snake actually injects its poison, then, like if you get bitten by a king brown snake, for instance, don't waste your time going to hospital. Just start saying your prayers, because you're done. Taipan, same thing. But, you have to get a decent bite, because it's not always the poison goes in. Sometimes it's just they bite and they let go. You get sick. But it's compared controlled senses are like a snake whose fangs have been extracted or broken. Sometimes they break the snake's fangs, sometimes they milk the poison to take out. So it's like that still the senses will bite. The senses have this natural propensity. They're drawn to their objects. You can't stop that. But if the senses are controlled, then even though they bite, don't take any notice. It doesn't affect you. Oh, there's an attractive. So what? Prabhupada was demonstrating this point, and he was talking about Yudhisthira. He was in somewhere in India, and Harikesh was talking to him, saying, how there's too many attractive women, the senses are so strong, etc., like that. And so Prabhupada, he told this story about Yudhisthira Maharaj, and how Krishna one time was talking to Yudhisthira Maharaj and saying, he said, Yudhisthira, your mother's very beautiful. Because Kunti was, a very, very beautiful woman. And he said, doesn't this affect you? Because they were traveling, always alone with his mother and things like that. He says, no. He said, I can see she's very beautiful, but I do nothing. And then just at that point, as Prabhupada was explaining this to Harikesh, then this life member and his wife came into the room, and young people, young wife, and Prabhupada, he said, just like I can see, you can see this woman, she's very beautiful. I am not blind. And this woman's feeling, what have I done? It's like Swamiji. And he said, but I do nothing. So it's not like, you just walk around with blinkers and you pretend things aren't happening. I mean, the world's happening around us, but not to be affected by it. This is the secret. It is just to be in the world, but not be contaminated or affected by the world. So if we can live like that, and obviously it's not an easy thing because we come from so many past lives of conditioning where we're exposed to all these different contaminating influences, and then we come to Krishna consciousness, and somehow or other we have to shed that. And the way we shed it is by Krishna consciousness, by filling our cup up with Krishna. And another analogy I can use, which is a really interesting, I find it an interesting analogy, is like Prabhupada describes how, if you have a cup that's half full of milk, and if you add ink to it, what happens to the milk? It becomes contaminated, it becomes colored by the milk. But you know what a meniscus is? Meniscus. Anyone here done science? Physics, chemistry? So you know when if you look at this water in the cup, right, what will you notice about it? Is the water completely flat from one side to the other? Yes, no, maybe? No, it curls up at the edges, right? That's called a meniscus. Right? So when you fill the cup to brimming over, right, there's a thing called a reverse meniscus. You ever notice that? How it's actually above the top of the cup, but it's down the edge. Albert Einstein explained this. It's what they call surface tension. Yeah? So the surface tension holds it together. The interface between the liquid and the air, it holds it together so that it doesn't flow over the cup. Now, I've never tried this experiment. Maybe you'd like to try it out sometimes, but it'd be a bit messy. But if you have a cup full of milk, right, and it's to the point where it's brimming over, you have this reverse meniscus. If you pour ink on the top carefully, guess what happens? It flows off. So if we become like that cup of milk, if we become brimming over with Krishna consciousness, and this is the point that I've been trying to make with this example of Thakur Haridas and all these other examples, if we become brimming over with Krishna consciousness, then no matter what happens to us in this material world, it's just like the old expression, water off a duck's back. Yeah? Or like the analogy of water on the lotus leaf, it just can't stick. So that's the goal, is to become brimming over with Krishna consciousness, so that even if we have these experiences in life where we're being afflicted or assailed by material desires, that we're not affected by it. It just flows off. It takes a bit of work, but it's possible. And there's so many examples of great souls that are like that. Even within our own movement, there's so many examples of great souls who are like that, who are so Krishna conscious that it doesn't matter what this material world throws at them, they just sail through it. And it's like that. This material world is going to throw so many obstacles at you. But whatever happens, take shelter of Krishna. Because everything in this material world is temporary. It comes, it goes. No matter how happy you are, it will come and it will go. No matter how distressed you are, it will come and it will go. Matra spasa tukunteya sitoshna sukutukuda. Agamapayon tas tang satikshvasa bharata. The non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress are like the appearance and disappearance of summer and winter seasons. Like it's raining today. In a few days' time it won't be raining. It might be shining. The sun might be shining. And then later on the clouds will be there. And then later on it'll be raining again. Maybe it'll snow. Who knows? But the point is that Krishna is making to Arjuna is all these things are temporary. Tang statiksha sabharata. Tolerate them without being disturbed. And use our energy to serve Krishna. Yeah. I'll just read the last bit of the purport. Therefore, husbands as a class cannot repay their debt to women either in this life or in the next. Even if they engage themselves in repaying the women throughout their whole lives, it is still not possible. And this is a really good point that Prabhupada's making here. It's like, in a relationship like that where a wife is serving her husband, and I know with my own wife, I mean, how she's facilitated my devotional service in my marriage, I can never repay that. I mean, taking care of the house, making the house an ashram. Not just a house, but it's an ashram. It's a place of shelter where it's peaceful, it's quiet, it's clean. How can you ever repay that? Even if they engage themselves in repaying the women throughout their whole lives, it is still not possible. Not all husbands are as able to appreciate the good qualities of their wife, but even though one is able to appreciate these qualities, it is still not possible to repay the debt to the wife. Such extraordinary praises by a husband for his wife are certainly in the mode of joking. So, yeah, Kashyapa Muni is trying to appease his wife. Just, okay, you're a wonderful wife, you're the queen of the house. And that's a fact. I mean, I know in my own house, it's like, outside the house, that's my domain. And I kind of, look after the yard and the garden and stuff like that. Inside the house, whatever my wife says goes. Simple thing. Peaceful. As soon as I start to interfere with what's going on in the house, I get in trouble. So I'm slowly learning not to interfere. It's taken me a while, but I am learning. Yeah. And so again, very, very instructive point here that we can see how Kashyapa is dealing with his wife. Yet still, because she's bitten by the desire to have a child by Cupid's arrow, that she cannot give it up. So this also helps us to understand, how advanced she is as a devotee. She's obviously not an unalloyed devotee. There must be some desire there. But we see, it's not like she's a rank neophyte or she's just a materialist. That's not there at all. Because we also see that when she finds out at the end of this chapter her children are going to be killed by Krishna, she's like, Hari Bol, this is great. She's really happy with that. Which is kind of unusual. Could you imagine, like, if someone come and told you your child's going to be killed by Krishna? Would you think that was good? You'd probably think, oh, that's pretty bad. My child, my dearly beloved, but she's really happy about it. Not only that, my grandson is going to be a pure unalloyed devotee. Ecstatic. She's really happy about that. So that helps us to understand, okay, she may not be an unalloyed devotee of Krishna, but she is quite an advanced devotee, because she's seeing that, even though it's not going to work out exactly the way she was hoping for, that she's still happy with it. Okay, any questions or comments on that at all? Yes, Will.
Wonderful class on the example that you gave. The example of Haridas Thakur, how when he was approached by someone who was so fixed in his determination, he made a plan how he was going to work.
Yeah. Yeah.
In our day-to-day life, that's the example that's given there. But in our day-to-day life, we have so many distractions. We have so many, when we're engaging with this world, there may be subtle distractions or whatever may come. Any practical advice on how do we build that determination, or that determination can waver from time to time and just pull us down? How do we? Satatam
kitayanto mam. Always chanting. the Lord's glories, endeavoring with great determination, bowing down before him. Just yeah, I mean, distractions come. Usually they're not so subtle. Usually they're quite gross. Generally the subtle ones come more as we advance in Krishna consciousness. Usually at our level of Krishna consciousness, it's all like gross in your face kind of distractions, sex attraction, intoxication, gambling, all the really gross stuff, But if we're always endeavoring to remember Krishna, if we're always endeavoring to think of Krishna, always endeavoring to talk about Krishna, always endeavoring to hear about Krishna, then gradually we will erode the attraction to these material things. And it's different for different, like for some devotees it's going to be more rapid, for some devotees it's going to be more slow. It just really depends on the nature. But it talks about yajeta purusham param, with tivrena bhakti yogena, forcefully engage in the process of bhakti. Push yourself. Don't just be like casual, like an armchair philosopher kind of thing, and just sort of stroking the chin and thinking about this and thinking. No, forcefully engage in the process of bhakti. Push yourself, push the senses, push the mind. Because if you don't, they'll push back even harder. The senses are ruthless masters, and if you don't whip them into shape, they'll dominate you completely. And this is why we see, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he would say that in the morning you must beat your mind with shoes, and in the evening you beat your mind with a stick 100 times. Because the mind is ruthless. And we see that there's different prayers there from different personalities, how like my mind, for so many lifetimes I've been your faithful servant, just let me one life, give this one life to Krishna. There's a prayer of a great Vaishnava. Because the mind is the most ruthless master. It will give you no peace. And it describes in the 6th chapter of the Gita how when the mind is engaged in the service of the senses, the mind is your worst enemy. There's no worse enemy than the mind. But if the mind is engaged in the service of Krishna, the mind is the best friend. So that's the trick is to, like, whatever it is you're doing, as Krishna describes in the 9th chapter of the Gita, he says, Yad karosi, yad jasi, yad dohosi, yad tapashashi konte, tat kurushamadapanam. That whatever you do, whatever you eat, whatever you offer, give away, whatever austerities you perform, you do that as son of Kunti and as offering to me. And then in the next verse he says, and in this way, with your mind fixed on me, in this principle of renunciation, you'll be liberated and thus you'll come to me. So the thing is, like, give up the attachment to enjoying these things. Give up the attachment to be. This part subtle is you give up the attachment to being the controller and the enjoyer, because that's really where it stems from. Is I think that this is mine. But in this situation you'll never be peaceful. If you look in the 5th chapter of the Gita, Krishna explains to Arjuna, he says, Bhaktarang Yagatavasam Sava Loka Maheshwaram Suriram Savabhutanam Gyatmamam Shantim Rishati. That a person who understands that I'm the enjoyer of all Bhaktarang Yagatapasam, all sacrifices and all austerities, I'm the only enjoyer. So if you're doing any sacrifice or austerity, the point here is do it for Krishna. Don't do it and think, oh, now I'm going to get some material benediction. Now I'm going to become a yogi and I'll be able to walk on water. No, don't do it for that reason. Do it for Krishna. Do this austerity, just like we follow a codicy. Why do we do that? For Krishna. We do fire sacrifices. So like you'll see in Mayapur, they do these fire sacrifices, and they're offering the grains into the fire. And they say, "Idam Krishna, idam namama." This is for Krishna. This is not for me. But the fruitive worker, he's doing, this is not for Krishna, this is for me. It's the opposite. Therefore, they become bound up. Therefore, they become, they're forced to experience happiness and distress as a result of their activities, because they're doing it for enjoyment. If you do it for enjoyment, yes, you'll get the result, but there's a lot of anxiety, a lot of issues come along with it. And then he says, Sarvaloka Maheshwaram, that I'm the controller. I'm the proprietor of all planets and the demigods on those planets. Everything I'm the controller of. And then he says, Suridam Sarvabhutanam. So Suhrit, there's three main words in Sanskrit for friend. There's Suhrit, there's Bandhu, and there's Mitra. Mitra is like an older friend. Bandhu is like an equal friend. And Suhrit means like the best well-wishing friend. So Su is like amplifies, and Hrit means the heart. So really what it means is that person who's got your best interest at heart. So the person is Suhridam Sarvabhutanam. He's the best well-wishing friend of all living entities. You've got no better friend than Krishna. Yeah? And actually, he's our only friend. And then the last thing that Krishna says, Gyatva mam, knowing me like this, Shantim Richati, he attains peace. So this is the only way you're going to attain peace. Prabhupada calls this the peace formula. The only way you're actually going to attain peace in this material world is understanding Krishna in this way. That he's the enjoyer, he's the controller, he's the proprietor, and he's my only friend. If you can develop that consciousness, then these things will have no effect at all. You'll see them come, you'll see them go, okay, fine, whatever. But you have to work at it. It's not just, if we come to the temple, once a day or once a week or whatever, and, it's like, they only go to church on Sundays kind of thing. Don't be a social devotee. Be a devotee. So often we find, especially in this century kind of thing, the 2000 onwards sort of thing, we find that ISKCON has expanded quite significantly. But then if you look at, and of course, sometimes it's okay to have a look at the broad picture, not like we're trying to, analyze people individually and sort of, pull them apart or, make fun of them or anything. But if you analyze the situation, you'll see that many of the people who come to the temple, they are devotees, but it's more of a social thing. They come here to meet their friends, they come here because the children can play with other children and stuff like that. That's not the purpose of taking the Krishna consciousness. It's better than not doing it at all. But the real purpose is to give our life to Krishna, to give up, this desire to enjoy the material world, to give up the desire to control the material world and go back to Godhead. And if you want to go back to Godhead, don't be a social devotee. Be a serious 100% committed person, that I'm committed to serving Krishna, to give my life to serving Krishna and going back to Godhead at the end of this life. You can do it in one life, but you have to be determined. So it really gets down to you, how determined you are. And the more determined you are, be mindful that the more the material energy is going to kick back. You'll get pushed back from material energy and you'll have to fight harder. So I hope that answers your question. Prabhu?
It's actually mentioned in the shloka that Kashyapa Muni seemingly joking.
Yeah.
A couple of shlokas ago it's mentioned that he's actually not spiritually advanced, but bigger advanced. So how do you understand this?
Well, he's not at the same level as Vidura.